Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Humza Faraz Qureshi. I am from Toronto West Jamaat, Halqa, Weston Islington. So my project is a JavaScript based stopwatch. So it runs here in the browser. As you can see, it has the title, the numbers that display the time of the stopwatch, and a start button, stop button, and reset button. All of this enclosed in a border. So as you can see, when I click start, the stopwatch starts and it displays the seconds. If I hit stop, it will stop the stopwatch at whatever time it's at. And if I hit reset, it'll go back to 0. And if I hit start and stop and then start again, it will start at whatever time it stopped at, and it will not reset. So this code has 3 main components, which are called the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. So if we start off with the HTML, this is required in order to display whatever you've made in the browser. And so that's what the HTML is for. So for example here, in this part, it shows you to put the title. H1 is a header. So it says, it's telling it to write JavaScript stopwatch project in the page. And that's what it's done. And then here, it's essentially said, okay, put some seconds, put some tens and hundreds of seconds over here, write them down onto the page. And here it said, okay, make some buttons. Say make a start button, make a stop button, make a reset button, right? But with just the HTML, all these things is just gonna be text on a blank page, and that's not cool. That it doesn't look nice. It's not very user friendly, right? So that's where the CSS comes into play. This is the styling. This is how you design what your thing is going to look like. So for example, we start with the background. So I've set the background to a color using a hex code, right? And that is why the background is blue and not white, right? This here essentially says what fonts we're going to use, the font type, right? And this is the wrapper. So if we go back to the HTML, you can see that everything that we've made is enclosed inside of this thing called wrapper. And here we have essentially defined what that is. Essentially the size of it, the color of it, where it should be found on the page, and the size of the border, right? So essentially what we've done here is that we've said that everything that was here in this HTML should be enclosed within the wrapper, and by defining what the wrapper is, we have made this, and we put a border around it so that we can see exactly what it is. And then there's H1, which if we go back here, we remember that's this header that says JavaScript stopwatch project. And we've said that this header should use this font and this font size, and it should be in uppercase, right? And here the seconds, tens, and the colon. If we go back here to the HTML, we can see that there's the ID seconds, the ID colon, and the ID tens. So if we look inside these, we can see that the thing with the ID seconds is this 00 right here. The thing with the ID colon is this colon, and the thing with the ID tens are these. And essentially what we've done here on the CSS is said that all of these things, all these three things, the seconds, the tens, and the colons, should have this font size. So then there's the buttons. This is important because right here in the HTML we have buttons technically, but they aren't actually buttons. It's kind of just text on the screen that says start, stop, and reset. So here with these buttons, we've essentially defined what the button is meant to be. This gives you the size of the button, the effect, how it darkens when you hover over it, how your cursor changes from the usual mouse to the pointer, and all this stuff is essentially defined by the styling of the button that we've done here. So that's all fine and dandy. We have a rectangle with some text on it and some buttons, but it won't be able to do anything without any actual code, and that is what the JavaScript part is. So all of this stuff is based on functions, which is essentially just an action that you can perform with the code. So the first thing that we've done here is essentially defined some variables, right? Like seconds and tens. But these are really important. This get element by ID with 10 seconds, button start, button stop, button reset. And if we go back to the HTML, you can see that we can find all of these IDs. Seconds, tens, button start, button stop, button reset. They're all here. Essentially what that means is that these variables will allow this code to understand what happens when we interact with the things here in the HTML. So with these buttons, we have now created a variable that the code can interact with regarding the things that we can see in the HTML. And so then we have a function that says onClick button start, as in when we click the button start button, right, which again is just this, which has been defined by this variable, it will start the timer. Same goes for the button stop. When you click it, it will stop the timer, and if you reset, it will turn tens and seconds back to 0. Right? So we go back here, essentially, to explain it a little better. We have the button, and so now this button exists in our HTML code. And now essentially we have said, okay, this button exists, so now when you click this button, what should happen? That's essentially what we have done here. And then this lower part is essentially defining how the seconds are going to go. How is this clock thing even going to work, right? So what it's essentially saying is that you go up in these digits, and when this one reaches 9, you can go up by 1 on this one, and similarly when that one reaches 9, you go up on this one, because that is how seconds and time works. You know, once you've reached 10 of one digit, you have to go over to the next one, right? So now all of these components are working together in our web page, but only because we have linked them here. So going back to the HTML, we have to make sure that we have linked both of our CSS file and our JavaScript file into the HTML. Otherwise, when we run the thing, nothing's gonna work, right? So we have first here linked the style, which is style.css, which is what we have here, and we've also linked stopwatchcode.js, which is here. And all of these things are located on my computer in a folder called Stopwatch with all of your folders inside, so that this way the HTML can interact with everything here and make everything work. So with all of these moving parts working together, you are able to achieve something like this. It's pretty cool, right? Now, you can also customize this, and this is pretty evident with the CSS part. So for example, let's say I wanted to change the background color. Let's say I don't like blue, right? I want to change it to something else. So let's go and do that. So let's go over to the style, and we find the one that says background, and this is telling us what the background color is supposed to be. So we can change this to any different color we want. We can make it say white, let's say. And if we reload, now the background is white, and we can't see the text because the text is also white, but it's also there in case we want it, right? Let's change this back to something cool. As you can see here, I have some funky things that let me change colors on my own. Change it to whatever color I want, save it, reload. You see, there's a problem in the code. You have to make sure that everything is perfect, otherwise it's not going to work. So as you can see, I forgot to add this little semicolon, which when we save should fix the problem. Yeah. So this is one of the more important things about code, is that you have to make sure that you have all the things in place, put them exactly where they need to be. Otherwise it's all going to fall apart. But you know, once you have it all working, you can get something like this. So I've changed the background color. I could change the sizes of some stuff. So for example here, the seconds, tens, and colon, you remember this? It's all this stuff right here. This says that all of this should be sized 60 pixels. But I can change that if I want. I can make it, 30 pixels maybe, which makes the thing really small. So there are other things that you can do to customize as well. So for example, with this wrapper, right? So before I said that basically everything here is enclosed inside of a box called the wrapper, and in the CSS we have given it a border so that we can actually see it, right? So right now it says 3 pixels solid white. That's essentially saying that the thickness is 3 pixels. It will be a solid colored border, and the color will be white. We can change that solid thing to something else. For example, dashed. What does that do? Let's give it a look. As you can see, it has turned it from a solid line into a sort of dashed line, and there are many other settings like this that can be done. So that is pretty much everything. The code that makes it run, the HTML that makes it appear on the page, and the CSS that makes it look very nice. So that is basically it. It's a simple project that anyone can make. Jazakumullah for watching the demo.